Are you in any type of concrete product manufacturing business and wondering if you've got all of your environmental bases covered? Or maybe you're running a concrete plant and wondering whether you have all of the permits and approvals you need and are in compliance with them so you don't get in any trouble. Or maybe you're looking to take steps beyond compliance to use your environmental program as a tool towards improving your bottom line? Well, if that sounds like you, this video will help. In this video, we're going to walk through the core environmental considerations for concrete plant operations, what you need to know, what you can do yourself, what a consultant like us can do to help, how much it might cost, and how long it normally takes. Before we dive in, here's why we think we are the best qualified to talk about this and to give your concrete company the assistance you may need. We've been in business since 1992, but our roots go back even further. Our team has decades of combined experience in environmental compliance specific to concrete products manufacturing and construction materials. Since the early 90s, we've worked with literally hundreds of ready-mix, precast, brick, block, pipe, and specialty concrete plants across the US, Central and South America, Canada, and even the Middle East. Big operations, small ones, old school setups, and high-tech facilities. If it involves concrete, chances are we've seen it. And that matters because even though no two sites are exactly the same, the regulations they face often are. Personally, I've been the developer and lead instructor of the National Ready Mix Concrete Association's environmental course since the very beginning back in 1998. And during that time, I've educated nearly 1,000 concrete industry professionals from all across the country. I was also the primary developer of NRMCA's Green Star Environmental Management System, or EMS, certification program. And over the years, I've worked with concrete producers across the country to tackle compliance, help them select the right property, and implement effective, comprehensive environmental programs. So in a sense, we here at RMA wrote the book on environmental practices for the concrete industry in the US. I don't say this lightly, but I truly don't think there's another environmental consulting firm that's been on site at more concrete plants than we have here at RMA. That's why we feel confident in saying this video is going to cover everything you need to know. All right, on to the good stuff. But first, as a reminder, we specialize in environmental regulatory compliance, due diligence, and greener services like EMS support and development, including NRMCA's Green Star program. Environmental work is what we do here at RMA. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's break that down into a kind of timeline. Before you purchase a property for a concrete plant, you'll probably need a Phase 1 environmental site assessment. We can handle that for you, and we specialize in all types of industrial properties, including those destined for concrete operations or those already in business producing concrete or concrete products. We've completed hundreds of Phase 1s at all types of facilities, including concrete plants, ready-mix, precast, brick, block, you name it, as well as sites being developed for concrete plants. So when it comes to Phase 1s in the concrete industry, we've seen just about everything. If you're buying an existing operation, you should also consider a pre-acquisition environmental audit. An audit helps identify which compliance requirements apply and what the current operation is already doing or is currently failing to meet. The goal is to find out where you'll need to invest and what potential liabilities you may face going forward. An important point here is that we can walk you through every step of this process, including handling any deficiencies found and even buying you the maximum amount of time to address any problems that we may uncover. As your plant gets closer to starting operations, that's usually when we come back into the picture. There are several core environmental regulations that will likely apply to any concrete facility in the United States. Water quality permitting, often called stormwater permitting, or technically NPDES permitting, is usually required in every state for every type of concrete plant. We can also help you with your non-stormwater concerns, what we typically refer to as process water, including recycling, water treatment, and discharge elimination. When it comes to stormwater and processed water, we've got you covered. SPCC plans, which are federally mandated, are necessary if you have fuel or oil storage or a maintenance garage on site. Tier 2 and TRI reporting are both annual requirements for hazardous material storage and use at your concrete plant. Most concrete plants will need to file Tier 2 reports. TRI reporting, on the other hand, usually only applies to medium or larger facilities, but it depends upon the specifics of your operation. Hazardous waste registration and management, which again depends upon your operation and the activities you do, is something that may apply to your concrete facility as well. Now, there are also other environmental concerns outside of our normal scope, such as local issues like wetlands, wildlife, noise, zoning, surveying, as well as air quality permitting. While we normally don't handle these directly, we can point you towards trusted nationwide partners for many of these concerns, such as for air permitting support. Now, if you're looking to take things a step further, many concrete producers pursue NRMCA's Green Star Environmental Management System program, but that's getting a bit ahead of ourselves right now. So in the short term, we can assist with a Phase 1 ESA or environmental audits before you finalize a location or purchase an operation. Soon after, we can identify and file applicable NPDES permits on your behalf, such as the stormwater permit. We can also develop your stormwater pollution prevention plan and your SPCC plan if needed, depending upon your operation. Then once the plan is up and running, we'd circle back to handle Tier 2 and TRI reportings, as well as any hazardous waste considerations. In the long term, we can support ongoing compliance. That usually includes things like annual training across various options, including in-person and online training, such as your required NPDES stormwater permit and your SPCC plan, keeping up with NPDES permit requirements like stormwater analysis results submittal, and filing your yearly Tier 2 and TRI reports. Think of it like hiring a CPA for your environmental compliance. If you don't need any help, then we really won't be around long term, and that's fine too. But if you need a set of eyes to make sure you're staying on course, we do that for a lot of concrete facilities across the country. Let's talk about what all this costs, the million-dollar question. And no, it won't cost $1 million. If you're handling everything yourself, the cost is really just your time. But let's assume you're thinking about this because you're considering hiring a consultant like me and our team here at RMA. Here are some ballpark figures if you go that route. A Phase 1 environmental site assessment typically runs between about $4,000 and $8,000. And yes, you might find someone local who says they'll do one for $2,000 or even less, but it really probably won't be any good. Realistically, expect to pay around $4,000 or $5,000 for a solid Phase 1. And if you need a Phase 2, and hopefully you don't, that can run to thousands of dollars depending upon the findings. But for now, let's assume you don't need a Phase 2. If you're buying an existing concrete plant, in addition to a Phase 1 to ensure that there's no environmental conditions of concern on the property, it's also worth knowing whether they've invested in compliance. If they have, you'll likely spend less in the long run. If they haven't, it'll cost you more. That's where an environmental audit comes in. An audit takes a deep dive into the plant's current compliance status. It identifies what applies, what's already in place, and what you'll need to take care of once this concrete plant becomes your responsibility. Audits typically range between $3,000 to $8,000, so let's call this one about $5,000 as well. NPDES permits typically range from about $3,500 to about $9,000, including both the application fees paid to the state and consultant costs. For budgeting purposes, plan on about $5,000. This is a permit you'll almost certainly need to operate. SPCC plans fall into a similar range, again, roughly $5,000. But whether you need one or not depends upon your operation. For small to medium plants, it's a solid maybe. For medium to large operations, it's usually a yes. And if you have a maintenance garage or fuel stored on site, it's almost definitely required. Tier 2 and TRI reporting are a bit more affordable. Tier 2 typically costs between $1,500 and $3,000, while TRI reporting can range from $2,000 to $5,000. Let's say you need both, and let's split the difference. You're looking at about $5,000 total in the first year. The good news is that the second year, year 2, and thereafter is usually cheaper, since your consultant will have already set up the process. At least it is with us. Hazardous waste registrations are even less expensive, usually falling between $1,500 and $4,000 in costs. Depending upon your generation level and storage volumes, you might also need a hazardous waste management plan, which could run between $3,000 and $6,000. For planning purposes, let's call this all $4,000. So all in all, before buying the property, plan to spend about $5,000 for a Phase 1 environmental site assessment. If you're buying an existing concrete plant, budget another $5,000 for an environmental audit. That puts you at about $10,000 just to understand what you're getting into from a compliance standpoint. To get operations started, expect about $10,000 for your stormwater permit and SPCC plan combined. Add another $5,000 for year 1 for Tier 2 and TRI reporting. If hazardous waste registration and a management plan are needed, that's about $4,000 more. You may also have additional considerations like air permits, above ground storage tank, fuel tank registrations, or other local requirements. Those could add a few hundred to a few $1,000s. Let's estimate around $3,000. That's $10,000 before purchase and roughly $22,000 in year 1 to get your environmental compliance program up and running. After that, you'll be looking at annual ongoing compliance costs. These might include NPDES permit fees, sampling or lab work tied to your permit, and annual SPCC and NPDES training. You'll also have your Tier 2 and TRI reporting due each year. While that might sound like a lot, a good rule of thumb is that your annual costs will run about 10 to 30% of your initial compliance setup. So if your NPDES permit costs $5,000 up front, you might expect to pay around $500 to $1,500 per year to stay in compliance, though the exact figure depends upon the permit and the specifics of your state. If you need someone to handle parts of this for you, like submitting NPDES discharge monitoring reports, expect an annual compliance contract to start at a few $1,000s. The bottom line, some facilities get by with minimal annual costs. Others, especially larger or more complex concrete operations, might spend tens of thousands per year to stay in full compliance. And if you want to go above and beyond, pursuing an environmental management system, like NRMCA's Green Star, will typically run a few $1,000s. At that stage, though, you're likely treating environmental compliance as a measurable part of your operation. The cost becomes part of a broader strategy tied to things that matter, things like efficiency, risk management, reputation, and long-term performance. Just remember, these are ballpark figures, not fixed costs. Your actual cost will vary based upon your site, your state location, your setup, and your particular needs and your operation. We can support you through every stage: upfront due diligence, the initial round of compliance, ongoing regulatory work, and long-term planning around environmental performance and impact. If you're feeling sticker shock or overwhelmed by this list of regulations, keep this in mind. Some of this can be done yourself, or may not even apply to your site and operation. Items like SPCC plans, Tier 2 reporting, hazardous waste registration, and local storage tank requirements can often be handled internally, if you have the time, the knowledge, and the confidence to do it right. There are no participation trophies when it comes to environmental compliance. It truly is either right or wrong. And in fact, you can think of it this way. Violations can cost tens of thousands of dollars per day if you get it wrong, let alone cost you customers due to a damaged reputation. Enforcement actions can be financially devastating, particularly if it's found out that you knowingly or willfully ignored or violated your requirements or the rules. And we've seen this happen. Not often, but enough. Some of the worst cases we've dealt with have dragged on for years and cost clients a small fortune in legal fees. It's always cheaper and easier to follow the law rather than try to fly under the radar and risk everything. Let's talk about timelines to wrap things up. Audits and Phase 1 environmental site assessments, your due diligence items, typically take a few weeks to a month to complete. They can be expedited if needed, but doing a thorough, well-rounded job usually takes around 4 weeks or so. NPDES permits and SPCC plans also take a few weeks to prepare. However, because NPDES permit issuance must be submitted to and approved by state agencies, you're somewhat at the mercy of state governments. Some states issue permits within almost hours. Others can take months or even years. The same timeline generally applies to hazardous waste considerations as well, including plan development, if that's required. Tier 2 reporting is generally fairly quick to complete, but for your first year, allow a few weeks just to be safe. TRI reporting tends to be more complex, and you should expect a month or two to get it done right, particularly if it's your first time. As for other local or third-party requirements like air permitting, storage tank registrations, or zoning, those usually fall into the same ballpark. Allow a few weeks to a month, depending upon who's doing the work and how responsive your local agencies are. So now that you've got a better sense of what environmental compliance at a concrete plant looks like, what it costs, and how long it might take, you might still have questions specific to your site or your situation. That's totally normal. If you're already working through these requirements or just starting to look at a new site, we'd be happy to have a conversation with you and help point you in the right direction, whether you work with us or not. Because at the end of the day, we want concrete producers to succeed with their environmental program and avoid the costly pitfalls that come with getting it wrong. If you've made it this far in the video, chances are you care about doing things right, and that's exactly the kind of company we like working with.